your highest rank?
Corporal.
Corporal.
Should I say that I was sergeant for about 15 minutes?
I think I would like to cover that. I'd like you to tell that story later, okay?
Sure.
All right. And in what general location did you serve?
Well, the United States and the Azores.
Okay, perfect. All right, then we get into specifics. Were you drafted or did you enlist?
I went down to the draft board and asked them to put my name at the top of the list, and they did. So I was drafted immediately.
Okay. Where were you living at the time?
At Pelham, New York.
And do you recall the date?
That I was drafted?
That you were drafted or when you first went in?
Well, I know it was early September. I can't remember the day.
Okay. And what year?
1945.
Why did you join?
Well, there had been a very nasty war going on, and we all thought that it was going to continue against Russia. And I didn't want to be, shall I say, behindhand in getting into the service, so I went down and asked that they put me up.
Okay. Why did you pick the Army Air Force?
I didn't pick it, they picked me.
Oh, they picked you.
Oh, yeah, the sergeant lined us up in no particular order and went down the line going, Army, Navy, Marine, Army, Navy, Marine, Army, Navy, Marine. And I was Army, and the guy next to me was Navy, and he groaned. And I said, what's the matter? He said, I get motion sickness very, very badly. And he said, I'm going to be seasick the entire time I'm on a boat.
Oh, geez.
So I said, let's swap. So we swapped, and the sergeant came over and said, you can't do that.
Oh, no.
I mean, for what reason? I mean, it's totally random.
Right.
But no, well, he could exert his authority, so he exerted his authority, and the poor guy next to me is, and I wanted to go in the Navy because I wanted to be a Navy radar technician.
Right.
So I went in the Army, and in their great wisdom, they made me a radar technician.
Worked out.
Oh, I didn't even know his name.
That was nice of you to try. Tell me about your first days in the service.
Okay. First days in the service. Well, I went in, we went to New York City dispersal unit. I think it was close to Grand Central. And they shipped us off to Fort Dix in New Jersey, where we were given a battery of tests over a period of days. And I got sent to Shepherd Field, Texas, which is right outside of Wichita Falls. And we went through basic training, which was interesting because it was infantry basic training for a bunch of guys that were in the Air Force, which, the Army being typical about that, that was what you all had.
Yeah, I think so.
And then we took another battery of tests, and I got sent to Fresno, California, Camp Pinedale, which was outside of Fresno, and got some training in being a radar technician and operator.
So that was when it was more specific.
Yeah. And then from there, I got sent to Westover Field. Oh, dreams of glory. And we concentrated on being radar technicians for ground controlled approach radar, where you actually talk the pilots into landing. And it's during nasty weather or during emergencies when they're losing control or losing engines or something like that. Some emergency where they need help landing, and we could talk them in through fog, snow, whatever.
Was that part of a training?
That was part of a training
For the pilots too, then?
for the, well, yes, and they were required, we didn't fly. Well, I shouldn't say that. We did a lot, but not technically.
Okay.
Pilots would be very uncomfortable taking orders from guys sitting in a box downtown, down on the ground,
Okay.
with plenty of reason. I mean, you know. And what we would do is, generally speaking, if a pilot hadn't done radar landings before or hadn't done very many of them, we'd fly with them.
Okay.
And we'd stand right behind the pilot
Okay.
during the landing. And so he would, you know, he would realize we trusted ourselves, so that maybe it was all right
So
to
these
do.
are pilots who had done the visual landings.
Oh.
You were preparing them for radar landings.
We were preparing them to land without seeing what the heck's going on.
Okay.
And they had green goggles and red tinted windows, or was it the other way around? Doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And so they couldn't see out. They could see all their dials and all the instruments and everything. And the co-pilot could see out, but they couldn't.
So it was the worst case scenario and really trusting the radar.
Yeah, oh yes.
Oh, okay.
Oh yes. And we had pilots who were very stubborn about it. And we we had one guy that was stubborn enough so that when the talker, the fellow that was talking to them, he said, you know, if you stay on your present course, you're going to land in hangar 4. And whoops, from the pilot, and off they went, circled around, came back to try it again. But it was interesting to get these fellows who were mostly pretty good pilots, because this was the end of the war. Actually, by this time, the war is over totally. And they were still piloting airplanes around. And they considered themselves pretty hotshot pilots because they'd survived the war and all the rest of it. And they were. We had some that were definitely hotshot pilots. We had one fellow who used to take off right out of the hangar. He didn't taxi over to the strip or anything like that. No, he right on the tarmac in front of the hangars and take off. And that was scary to everybody.
Yeah, they were definitely hot dogs. So your basic training where it was boot camp was mostly in
Texas. Yeah.
Okay. And you did the typical marching and
Oh yeah.
mess hall and all those.
Oh yeah. We found out something very quickly. The first day, our sergeant comes out, and he was a little guy, and we found out he was a belly gunner on a B-17.
Wow.
Yeah. And he'd been brought back because they said it was enough and brought him home. And he stood out in front of us all, and he looked around and he said, is there any of you guys ever have any practice, a close order drill? And I stuck my hand up and he said, front and center. So I came out, stood in front of him. He looked at me and he said, well, we're going to try this. You're my assistant. Okay. And I turned around, there's 120 of us in the unit. Yeah, it was not a platoon, it was a miniature company. And they're all looking at me, okay, kid, because I looked like I was about 13. The German PWs that were still around thought I was about 13 years old.
Oh, there's funny.
Yeah, well, there were still some there, not many. And they looked at me, you say you won the war, and you're still drafting 13-year-olds. And I said, okay, you know. So anyhow, I turned around, okay, flight. And I called them to attention, and they all did, which I thought was very nice of them.
Wow, you must have felt cool.
Well, I did, but I had a, shall we say, a penetrating voice. I'd been coxswain on the local crew when I was in high school, and we came from a very noisy family where my mother was stone deaf and so was her mother. And conversations were usually heard by everybody within a 2-block radius.
Plus, you had to speak up to be heard in the family anyway. We've got that many kids.
Well, sure.
Yeah.
Well, and
Oh.
it was interesting. So anyhow, I ended up going through basic training as the assistant drill instructor.
Wow, that's pretty neat.
But-
And you were one of them, but you were assistant drill instructor.
Yeah, and we found out very quickly, if you are in a formation of any kind, and you're marching along somewhere, and there's some guy alongside me, counting cadence.
Yes.
Nobody asks where you're going. Nobody asks what you're doing. You can explore every place on the base and nobody says anything. It's like, you know.
So did you have fun doing the cadence? I know there was a special name for it.
Cadence.
Did you make up your own?
Oh yeah, we made up some cadences and we had fun doing that. And we made up some little ways to confuse the opponents. Which meant anybody else marching, we'd pick up a cadence that was just a little bit different and watch how they started shuffling their feet around. And they,
Oh, you must have been great at that.
oh, and they had a good time with it. They had a good time with
That's
it.
fun. I'm glad I asked you about that.
They were building a new, what we used to call infiltration course. It's an obstacle course, basically. And we found it. Off in the boonies, you know.
Well, you did one of these marches, right?
Oh yeah, we that was on a Sunday, Saturday afternoon or a Sunday. What are we gonna do? And so we'd get together a bunch of guys who wanted to go visiting places, and we'd go in formation. Nobody objected. So we found they're building this place, and it was totally incomplete. I mean, it just mostly mud, and we'd go down there and we'd go through the thing and have a good time jumping the ditches and walking on the they had pipes this big around going over a ditch, and we'd walk across the pipes. So one day our sergeant comes out and he says, I have a treat for us today. And he says, okay, fall in. So we all fell in and lined up, and he takes us down to this brand new infiltration course, which of course we knew intimately. Yeah. And he looks at us and he says, there are 120 of you guys, and this course is pretty well lined up, but we'll have people showing you where to go anytime there's a question. And he says, you've got 2 hours to complete it. Well, we went through it in an hour and 15 minutes.
Oh, so nobody found out that you
Oh,
were...
no, nobody found out about us going down there and doing this. And we finally got that down, so we got 120 guys through in 45 minutes.
Oh,
And it was hysterical
he
to
was
watch.
impressed with you.
Oh, well, he thought, well, they were. These route marches that they do, that's ROUTE marches, where you go 5 miles and then you work up to 10 miles, then you work up to 20 miles and all that kind of stuff. And they made a big mistake. The first route march they put us on, they put us in the lead. And we were back in the barracks, all washed up, cleaned up, taking our showers and gotten into Class A uniforms. And these guys were beginning to draggle in. We just tore through the 5 mile march. So the next time they decided it was a good idea, they put us in the back.
Oh.
Sure. Well, it got so that we were we were hiking or whatever you want to call it so fast that we were just passing the other guys all the time. And we ended up in the lead.
You must have got quite a reputation.
We did. And I made a habit of any time it was volunteers, I volunteered.
That's interesting because other veterans have said to me, whenever you never volunteer for anything because you never know what it'll be. So
Yeah. So I
you
volunteered.
worked out.
I worked out the other way. And I volunteered for everything. Yes, and I got some very awful things to do.
Oh, I'm
I mean, cleaning the grease trap in a mess hall that hadn't been cleaned in months.
Seems to me the mess hall duty was really about the worst.
Well, the KP wasn't bad.
Okay.
If you had a sergeant cookie that was at least somewhat benevolent, you know, he wanted it done the right way. If you didn't pick up the right way right away, you found out what to do. And to me, that was reasonable. It was his mess hall. He liked it a certain way, and that's what you did. Yeah. But anyhow, I got a reputation to the point where my sergeant would get out in front and he'd say, "I need Denny and 2 volunteers." And I got some, as I say, I got some real scut work. And this one time, we're coming out of the mess hall right after breakfast, and there's Denny report to squadron headquarters. So I reported to squadron headquarters. The sergeant looks at me. He says, "I want you back here in 5 minutes, clean shaven, Class A uniform, ready for inspection." Well, I said, you know, it didn't take 5 minutes. It took more like 10 to 15 minutes. And I came back, you know, Sergeant, and he looks me all over, walks around me, for crying out loud, and says, "Come with me." And we get out and get into a Jeep. And he takes me up to base headquarters. I mean, you know, I'm sitting there thinking, what have I done?
They got me.
I said, you know, I've kept my nose comparatively clean. I don't think they know some of the things I've done, but I don't know how they would if they did. You know, and I get up there, and he comes in and he says, "Sergeant Major." Now, being sergeant is one thing. Sergeant Major is like being camp commander. I mean, people don't realize it, but the sergeant major's got more power than any officer, except the commanding officer. And you can request things, but you damn well don't order him around, not at that level. And the sergeant major gets up, and he gives me an inspection, you know, fingernails, the whole bit. And then he goes over to this door, knocks on it, and opens the door and says, "He's ready." And I thought, oh, God. And I go through the door, and here's the colonel standing there. And I mean, you know, the next thing after colonel, of course, is general. And we didn't have a general on the base that I knew of. Thank heavens. And he looks me all over. The first thing he said was, "This is a man." I mean, I still look around 13. "This is the man." And the sergeant major says, "Yes, sir." And he looks me all over, and then he says, "Private, Denny?" And I said, in those days, we didn't have little tags telling people who we were. Nowadays, they're smarter. They put a name on you. And I said, "Sir." He said, "I'd like you to meet my niece." And and he does this, and from behind me comes this very cute 16-year-old. "She's never been on an army base before, and I'd like you to show her around."
He trusted you?
He trusted his sergeants to pick somebody who was,
Oh my God.
quote, safe.
Wow.
Or at least responsible.
I didn't really know you.
Yeah, I had a name for myself as being the volunteer.
Yeah.
You know, they all knew that Denny volunteered for anything that was going on.
And you'd get the job done.
And I'd get the job done. So anyhow, we were given box lunches and asked if I had a bathing suit. And I said, "Yes, sir." Because, come on, this is Texas. So we went off, And I had a special pass so I could go to the officers' club and use their swimming pool if she wanted to. And so we spent the day, and I mean the day, right up until retreat time when we haul the flag down at 6 o'clock. and we had a very nice box lunch and all the rest of it. And I finally brought her back home, you might say. And we said goodbye, and I went back to my barracks. And when I walked into the barracks, I was, where the hell have you been? And I said, well, they asked me to show some people around the base.
Yeah.
What were they like? Civilians. And I never told a soul.
Oh, you didn't?
Oh, I would have been killed.
Yeah, you and your special privilege.
Yeah, me and my special privilege of getting, oh, she was a cute little girl. And of course, at 18, I felt like I was so much older.
Oh, I'm sure you did.
And,
Because you weren't here.
I was in uniform, and she's got,
Yeah. See her again?
No. She wasn't from that area of the country anyhow. They were visiting. And the other time that I had a deal was I had to clean the grease trap in the mess hall. And it's down in the sump, lower down, so everything flows through. And when grease has been sitting around for a while, it gets very rancid and very smelly. So I get down there and I took the lid off, placed it over to the side, and then made a mistake of inhaling.
Oh.
And I lost everything I'd eaten for about a week, maybe 2 weeks. I just brought my insides out. That was awful. And anyhow, I got it all cleaned and went back to my CO and told him it was all cleaned. Now, this was on a Friday, and I was back there before lunch. I don't know if I could have lasted any further anyhow. Whew. Even after I got it all cleaned out, it still was, it smelled. And I cleaned myself up, went back, saw the lieutenant, actually captain that time. And he said, well, he said, pretty bad. I said, yeah, pretty bad. And he said, well, I got a 3-day pass for you. He says, just a minute. This pass starts at 8 o'clock on Monday morning, goes to 8 o'clock Thursday morning. 3 full days. And he said, and this is Friday. You're off duty. He says, you can go anywhere you want. So I had Friday evening, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. I mean, how could you lose? 6 days.
You made it work though.
Yeah, and so I went to see my sister down in, she was down in Laguna Beach, California, and I was up in Fresno for this one. And then when I got back, my reputation, as they say, had gone before me. And I don't know what I ever did, but I had a sergeant that didn't care for me. Not immediately in the chain of command or anything like that, but he worked in the headquarters. So he started assigning me to guard duty every other day. And I don't know what happened. The first night on guard duty, he comes by at 11 o'clock, says, bangs on the bunk, says, "You want your midnight chow?" And I said, "No, thanks." And he comes back, he goes all down the whole barracks, and comes back, bangs on my bunk again, says, "Hey, you want midnight chow?" And I said, "No, thanks." And he's back 10 minutes later. Bang, bang, bang on my bunk. "Hey, Denny, you want chow?" And I said, "Sergeant, I said no." And that's when it started. And so after a week of this every other day, but by the way, what he was doing was totally against Army regulations. So after a week, one day on, one day off, one day on, one day off type thing, I realized that I was going to be doing this until I got shipped out. So I went down to the mess hall and I asked the sergeant if he'd like a volunteer. He said, "Yes. If you're on KP, you cannot be put on guard duty."
Smart.
And I was on permanent KP. First day I get there at 6 o'clock in the morning. That's what time he said he wanted me, so I was there at 6. And he says, I need those potatoes done in the corner over there. I said, looked at the potato sack. I said, there must have been 200 pounds in that potato sack. So I said, "Fine, where's the peeler?" And he says, "It's out on the back porch." He says, "It doesn't work." I said, "You got any tools?" He said, "What are you talking about?" I said, "Well, we'll find out why it doesn't work and fix it." I took it apart. The reason it didn't work, it had never been cleaned out. The potatoes peelings and everything were in there, caked like cement. And I cleaned all of that out and everything else and got it all nice and sparkly, new looking. Turned it on and it purred. And I peeled whatever amount of all those potatoes anyhow got peeled in time. He says, "You're kind of handy." I said, "Well, it was interesting." He said, "Well, I got a few more things that are interesting too." So I spent the first week cleaning up all of this automatic stuff that they had in the kitchen that nobody knew how to clean. And making sure that the guys who came in for permanent KP, for punishment KP, were doing their job right. I mean, you always got some KP, regardless, and it wasn't punishment, it was just automatic. And, everybody jumps in. And so by the time I'd been there for a week, I was the golden boy. I could have steak for breakfast if I wanted it, which was fine. And then we got our orders to go to Westover, and that little job ended. And then we went to Westover on the first through train car of a train from California to Massachusetts. They'd never had a through car before. And so here we were in this California car with, I don't even remember, it was like Santa Fe something, and, logos on it, and all the way to Massachusetts. I shouldn't say the first one. It was the first one that had been used by the service to do this.
Okay.
There had one other where they had all sorts of high mucky mucks going from California to Massachusetts or something. God knows what, but they rode along.
So did you ship out with several of your?
Yeah, all of us, actually 11 of us together went. Some of the guys I didn't know, of course, but 11 of us went and learned how to play with radar.
Okay, that's where your radar was too. Okay.
Yeah, and that was the advanced training. That was for GCA training. Okay. And we had Blois D. Fitzgerald was our instructor, and he was a sergeant.
I asked you about that.
he was a sergeant. Well, this guy was a sergeant who owned his own electrical engineering company,
Oh.
and they drafted him totally by mistake. And he was doing specialized work for the Army and for the Navy and, for the services. And some guy calls up, wants to talk to Blaze. Well, he had 5 offices around the United States. Chicago, Texas, and California, and all that sort of stuff. And he would go to whichever office needed it. And he was a bloody genius and a terrific guy. And he brought out this book. It's about 3 inches thick, plus covers. And he plunks it down on the table. And he said, outside there's a radar unit, ground control approach radar. It's a trailer, and it's got radar in it, and you're going to learn how to play with that. He said, and this is what you're going to learn. He said, I have gone into that thing, and I have screwed up every possible unit that I can, and you're going to fix it. And this is the book. He says, and he picked out guys to fix certain parts.
You were a team. Oh, to certain parts.
We were
Okay.
2 of us at a time, certain parts, and go fix it. So we did. We went.
It was a real teamwork.
Yeah, and we had two guys, and we did. We all fixed each of our units until it ran. And then he gets us all together. This is like a Monday again. And he says, okay, I've screwed it up. You're changing partners. And go fix it. And the first guy had to go back to his original spot, right? So, and the second guy went to a new place to find something new. Oh, God. And we fixed it. We went through that entire unit until every one of us had done everything that's in there. And he was absolutely fantastic. It's like they tried to get a hold of him. They called up his main office. He says, oh, Dr. Fitzgerald, yeah, you drafted him. You ought to know where he is. He's a sergeant now. Sergeant? This guy should have been a major at least. I mean, his own. So they finally find him. And these guys drive up in a couple of limousines and they pile out Dr. Fitzgerald, and he's got his stripes and everything. Yeah. And he says, we're such and such and so and so, and we're going to give you a commission. And Blois looks at him and says, no. What do you mean, no? He said, you drafted me. I'm an enlisted man. That's where I stay. So he had colonels working for him. He had all of these other scientific guys doing his work. And he's a sergeant.
It's probably, like the teacher that wants to stay in the classroom.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, when you were working with him, he was a civilian. He was Dr. Fitzgerald.
Oh, no.
Oh, he was a sergeant.
He was a sergeant, but everybody,
Okay, so
but all of these guys from the government were calling him doctor all the time. We had no idea he was a PhD.
Okay.
Absolutely none. And,
Wow.
he had some marvelous things. He said, if you got a choice, you can do it electronically or you can do it mechanically. Do it mechanically. It's a heck of a lot easier to fix.
Right, because then you know what everything goes into it.
Yeah. And he'd say, now, fellas, at some point you're going to get some snot-nosed little lieutenant who's going to come up and go through, make you jump through hoops to get the equipment you need. He said, go strictly by the book. In 24 hours, 48 at the most, you will have that place so screwed up that they've got to do it your way. And he was right.
Did you do that?
Yeah. Yeah.
Did you have classroom instruction as well
Oh,
when
yes.
you were there?
Oh, yeah.
Do you remember any of your other instructors, or is he really the main one that sticks out?
He's the main one who sticks out. All the other guys were just peripheral. You know, they were, he was the blooming genius with a sense of humor that was delightful and really good. Really good.
Cool. Okay, so after boot camp, you were at Fresno, is it?
Yeah, we went to Fresno after getting out of basic training, and then from Fresno, that's where I had to show the girl around.
Okay.
God, and you know, the war was over. But if you were in uniform and you went out and put your thumb out on a highway, you could get a ride right away. People were still treating soldiers and sailors the way they should be treated, as far as I'm concerned.
I agree.
It's
I know it's changed. Not in a good way.
that's for sure.
Um,
So then we went to Fresno, and from Fresno, at the time I was in Fresno, my brother was in Sacramento, which is, you know, is the capital. And he was on a Navy unit there. What they were doing, I have no idea. And he came out to visit me once in Fresno. Flew in. Oh my God. And by this time he's a lieutenant commander. And I mean, the spit and polish, and they were rolling out everything under the sun because this guy, he was my half brother. But it didn't make any difference. He came by to say hi anyhow, which was kind of fun, and of course it was it was very disruptive of the base.
yes, I can imagine.
Well, you see, Pinedale was a camp, but didn't have an airfield, and so if we wanted to, we had to go to the airfield and all that sort of stuff. So they sent a special car out for him with a driver and all the rest of it, bring him back. And of course, I see him and I go bouncing across this private first class and give him a great big hug. And he's suddenly realizing I'm taller than he is, which was a big shock to him. Well, I grew 3 inches while I was in the Army. I went from 5'7" to 5'10". I'm back to 5'7" now. It was a lot of fun. Of course, I saluted him and hugged him.
Did he share some of his stories with you?
Yes, he did. As I said, he was at Dutch Harbor, an executive officer when the Japs bombed Dutch Harbor. And then quite often he was the navigator on a PBY that was leading the Army B-17 bombers to bomb Attu, which the Japanese had occupied. And most people don't know it, but when we went in and reconquered Attu, there were no Japs. They'd all left ahead of time, in spite of which we had something like 26 fatalities. friendly fire. But anyhow, Charlie was an absolutely fantastic navigator. And when one of his CBs on the base said, Commander. And Charlie goes over there. He says, look what I got. He's got a hand grenade. Yeah. And he says, you can pull the pin out. And he says, don't worry about it. I demobbed it. He put the pin back in. So Charlie borrows the hand grenade and he takes it into the officers' club. Hey, fellas, look what I got. Look. She picked it right up. It's a hand grenade. It's a Japanese hand grenade. Look, it comes apart, too. Under the table behind the sofa, through the door. And he said that room was empty inside of 3 seconds. That's the kind of humor you got in the service, anyhow.
Yes, it was.
And it was
like survival.
Yeah. Then another time, he finally gotten to be on an aircraft carrier, CIC, which is the Combat Information Center downstairs, down below decks, excuse me, for the Navy people. And they were on this invasion of some island, and don't ask me which, Charlie could have told you. And they came to a lull. As Chaz decided he'd go upstairs, topside, and see what was happening. So he goes up topside, and he's looking around, and as he looks off towards the island, here's a Japanese plane, and he said, "He's coming right straight at me." And of course they're throwing all the anti-aircraft stuff in the world, and it tips the plane a little bit, and it veers off. And as Charlie said, it's going to go by on my right. And he said, well, not quite. It went by, but the wing caught a cable that was supporting a mast, and it pinwheeled into the ocean and exploded. It was a kamikaze. And Charlie said, he went down below decks. He said, much safer feeling.
Especially if you could be way below.
Yeah, well, not too far below. You don't want to be below the Plimsoll line, which is the line that anything below that could be below water. Yeah, you want to be able to get out.
Okay, so you had Fresno. You told me some stories about that, and then Westover.
Yeah.
And your assignment there was the tactical.
Well, at Westover, we did the GCA.
Okay.
And that was Dr. Fitzgerald.
That was Dr. Fitzgerald.
Yeah.
Okay.
Blois D. Fitzgerald.
Okay.
I
okay, go ahead.
always meant to look him up after I got out of college, and I never did. Well, I realized I was in college majoring in physics with math and astronomy minors. And in my junior year, early on in my junior year, I realized something. You know what astrophysicists do? They spend all night taking photographs.
Yeah.
And all day analyzing them. I like people. What the hell am I doing?
Yeah, that would be for you.
Nobody to talk to, for crying out loud.
Did you ever find his book that he showed you, or would that be more related to the service, the Army and Air Force, so you wouldn't have access to it?
Whose
the
book?
book that he told you, this is the book of instructions.
Oh, this is the Bible? Yeah.
The Bible?
Yeah, he called it the Bible. Did I ever find it afterwards?
Yeah, do you think it
No.
was probably, okay.
I don't know whether it ever became public domain. As a matter of fact, I don't know if the stuff that I was taught is still classified or not. I don't imagine it is, because people are making their own video cameras and everything else today, and it's basically radar. It's Yeah.
Okay, so about how long were you at Westover?
April to August.
Okay. And then where did you go after that?
Azores.
That's when you went to the Azores?
Yeah.
Okay. And what was your assignment there? What did you?
GCA. I was a technician and operator, which meant that actually what I was doing was what they call the azimuth, and another guy was doing the elevation. And the azimuth means your radar goes out and does a sweep of a certain amount of the territory that's out there. We could go as far as 15 miles, I think it was, for the long range. And I had a line that told me where the center of the runway was.
Right.
And it projected all the way out. So when an airplane came in, I could tell him, you got to move a little bit to the left or right in order to, and I'd have that on my marker. And the talker is usually Earl Cash, and Earl would sit there and talk them in and say, you're to the left of the center line of the runway. And one fellow that he did this with, I was in the airplane standing behind the pilot. And Earl's talking this guy and talking this guy and talking this guy. And the fellow over on the elevation is telling him a little bit more, come down a little bit faster and go up a little bit faster, that sort of thing. And my job was to tell him go right or left. But when I'm in the airplane, there's somebody else doing my job.
Right.
And I'm just.
You're more the, yeah.
I'm the liaison just to keep them on target. And I can hear Earl because I got the earphones on too. And Earl says, and in 5 seconds, 4 seconds, 3 seconds, you will touch down 6 inches to the left of the center line of the runway.
Wow.
And the pilot whips off his glasses. Son of a bitch, I can't do that. And from that point on, that particular pilot flying into the Azores at our place would always request a GCA landing. I mean, it could be an absolutely clear day with, unlimited sights, seeing in all directions, and he'd request a GCA practice run, which for us was fine.
Sure.
I mean, we told them, pilots as they came in, I said, we don't care if it's 2 o'clock in the morning. We'll land you. And of course, when they're doing that, 2 o'clock in the morning, they can see.
Right.
But we tell them, we got you on our scopes, and this is what you need to do. And that's what happened. Eisenhower came through. And they wouldn't tell us. They wouldn't tell us what kind of airplane he was in. They wouldn't tell us how fast he was. We got nothing. They requested a GCA landing. This was about midnight, maybe a little after. And how the hell do we know what to do? Well, come on, fellas. We know what to do. And we can estimate his speeds and everything else. And of course, he's in one of these Air Force One type airplanes. And he landed, and we didn't know who it was. And we went up to the mess hall because at 2 o'clock in the morning, you might just as well get a little bit of.
You're up anyway, so.
You might as well have some early breakfast or late dinner or whatever you want to call it. And suddenly we're sitting there at the table, shoveling it down. And oh my God, this constellation of stars on shoulders comes in the building. And we're sort of, well, the rule in a mess hall is when somebody calls attention, you just put your knife and fork down, but you don't do anything else.
Right.
And he comes in and he says, as you were, which means you can go back to normal, so we go back to normal. And then suddenly, there's 6 of us at the table, right? And there's 2 empty seats. And suddenly, this guy comes along and says, "You gentlemen mind if I sit here?" No, General. I mean, we're all trying to stand up and salute and everything else under this. I mean, you don't, you're a private for crying out loud, or a corporal, which we were. And you don't expect a 5-star general to ask if he can sit down. So he did, and we chatted for probably an hour. And he wanted to know what each one of us was doing. And we were all saying, as soon as we could get out, we would get out. And some guys were saying they were going to go back to college. I was going to go to college. and we had a motley crew. We had one kid who was working towards his PhD in history. We had another who was a concert violinist. I mean, why the hell was... Well, we had another guy who was on his way to getting his degree in automotive engineering out in Detroit. We had another fellow who was on his way to electrical engineering at Drexel Tech. That was my special buddy, Don Berg. And you had another guy who was a bootlegger from Detroit. Well, his dad had been a bootlegger in the 20s, 30s, and he'd been a bootlegger for meat coming in from Canada. He said, "You didn't suffer from meat deprivation in Detroit." Not when he was around. And myself, that was about, there was Joe Palumbo. Joe had our Bible committed to memory.
Wow.
You tell Joe, I got a 6V23 tube, and I just pulled it out of this amplifier over here. And Joe would say, and you'd say, "Where does it go next, Joe?" And he could tell you the entire wiring diagram that leads up to that and away from that. Wow. From memory. Wow. But don't let him try to fix it. Because he's the one guy in the world that you put a soldering iron in his hand and he is destruction embodied, not construction. He literally couldn't do it. He just did not have the coordination to be able to solder something without destroying the soldering point next to him. But whenever we got stuck, "Joe, where does this go? I got a capacitor over here that's not working." "Well, why don't we replace that, and then we can test it again."
So when General Eisenhower sat with you, it was just chatting like you were buddies and
Yeah.
finding out what you want to do.
Yeah.
I did hear that about him.
And then I met him again at Columbia University. Just walking across the campus, and he was the president of the university at the time. And I said, "Hi, General, good to meet you again." And wait a minute. So I waited. "When did we meet?" So I told him, "Oh, I remember that. So you did go to college?" I said, "Yes, sir."
Now, was the Azores, were the pilots still training, or were they coming in?
Oh no, they were working.
They were working. They were coming in from combat.
Yeah, and some of this was during the Berlin airlift, I think.
Okay.
The early part of the airlift. That was weird. Yeah. But what we were doing was most of the time was passenger planes and freight planes. Landing and refueling and going on to Europe, and in a couple of cases they went off to Africa, but mostly it was all Europe bound. And we had our living quarters let's say the U.S. Army Air Force. Next to us was the RAF, and I had tea with them damn near every afternoon. Next to them was the United States Navy base, and next to them was the Portuguese Air Force.
Wow.
And all of these guys, and it ran rather smoothly because the Army Air Force was running the base.
Okay.
And so the RAF and the Navy, no problems. The Portuguese would never clear their landings and takeoffs. You'd be coming in on an airplane and suddenly some airplane would come and swoop down in front of you. Yeah, well, since we had the radar, we could tell them, look out, you got some jackass coming in, you know. And it did not lead for, well, let's put it this way. There was only one place that we were told was cleared for meals, not on base. And the guy was a Portuguese who'd gone to the United States, had worked up to where he owned a restaurant in the United States, sold it and retired to the Azores. And they're all Portuguese. The only language I know is no faz mal, which is sort of like que sera, sera. And his food was okayed. No place else. You never could tell. I mean, at our nearby town, the sewers were ditches in the middle of the road. The road was cobblestoned and there was a ditch right in the middle. Yeah, people would say, oh, they'd see photographs. Oh, that's such a lovely place. Just don't be downwind. It's a little bit rough there, you know.
So it was a typical day for you there. You didn't really have a set schedule because you didn't know when they would come in.
We had two groups, and what we would do is we would start at 8 o'clock in the morning and go to 8 o'clock in the morning.
Okay.
24 hours on, 24 hours off, 24 hours on, 24 hours off. We found that we liked that more. And since it was just us, they didn't give a damn how we did it, so long as it was covered. And when we'd been in Westover, we did it 36 hours. Well, you know, you'd start at 8 o'clock in the morning and you'd go through until 8 o'clock the next night. But during the nighttime at Westover, there wasn't anything happening. Yeah, we did tell the guys, you know, if you wanted to practice at 3 o'clock in the morning, give us a call. And so we'd go down and crank it up and start in. But and while we were doing all of this stuff, we invented a gadget that allowed us to set up in about 15 minutes instead of taking the usual half hour. And then what we did in the Azores is we made a permanent spot so we could go down, turn it on, and start as soon as it got warmed up, which took about 10 minutes.
So you would hear from a pilot?
We would hear from the tower.
From the tower.
There's a pilot who's 50 miles out and he's requesting a GCA landing. Okay.
And you all went to your assignment.
Oh, we all went rushing all over the place, you know.
So you had your basic group or unit that you were with pretty much all the time?
Yeah. Cool. Like I said, Earl Cash was the talker.
Yeah.
And the other one, it was... he was the history major. Had red hair, red beard, delightful sense of humor, and Jewish. And oh, did he love to tell Jewish jokes. Oh, what the hell was his name? Oh, well, I've got it written down somewhere.
That's okay. We'll
No, you won't.
So you didn't see any combat?
No.
Okay.
No.
All right.
By the time basic training really got started, combat was entirely over, and I think they cleared out most of the little remaining pockets of Japanese. I mean, the Germans had surrendered in June,
Yeah.
and this was September. The Japanese had essentially surrendered in August. I know it wasn't formal until September.
And then, how long were you in the Azores?
I was home for Christmas, August to December.
Okay. After the April, August. Okay. How did you stay in touch with your family at the time?
Well, when I was in California, my sister was in Laguna Beach,
Right.
which meant I could. The machinations you went through, I would make a reverse charge call to Laguna Beach. And she would either pick it up or she'd
We
say,
did that too.
or say no and hang up and then dial me. When I wanted to call Norfolk or Palomar, I'd get on the phone and I'd say, is operator number 9 still up? And operator number 9 would come on. And I'd say, Mary, it's Duncan. I want to talk to Palomar, or I want to talk to Norfolk, Connecticut. And it cost me a nickel. And I'd get a trunk line all the way to White Plains and then one of the two. And it cost me a nickel. And she would usually say, I don't do this for everybody. And so I'd take her a present occasionally. But that's the way I did it in California. When I was at Westover, it wasn't a local call, but it wasn't a hard thing to do. And when I was in Texas, I wrote lots of letters. Well, when I was in high school, it was at South Kent. And for breakfast on Monday morning, you had to present a letter to your family. Yeah. You didn't get breakfast until that letter was presented. And if you didn't present it, you had to go write it and then present it. And by that time, of course, breakfast was over. So I was in the habit of writing one a week, and I kept it up more or less, at least through basic training. And then when I got to Fresno, I would either talk to Dottie or I'd talk to, and the word would get around. At one point, I figured out that I was no matter where I was in the United States, there was a first cousin within 400 miles. And it was not that I talked to all of them or anything like that, but it was kind of comforting to know that there was family somewhere in the neighborhood. And it was a lot of letter writing. And of course, back then, you didn't go steady, not when you were in high school, and especially at boarding school. A little difficult to do that. And so you dated around. And at one point, I was writing to 14 different girls.
I didn't even know that?
Oh, yeah, they all know it. Well, at least they knew I was not just writing to them exclusively. 3 of those girls went to Westover. 2 of them went to Dobbs Ferry. Answer the damn phone, Ayersley. Thank you. And it was, and they were writing to probably 10 or 12 or more boys. I mean, it was.
That's what you did during the service.
Well, that's what you did back in the 40s, the 30s, the 40s. you did not exclusively start dating, and not when you were, as my father said, if you can't support her, don't get serious. Okay.
Smart man.
Yeah, he didn't get married till he was in his 30s, so yeah. I didn't get married till I was, well, 2 days later I was 28, so I always say 28.
I was 28. What was the food like?
Ever been to Litchfield Woods?
Yes.
Did you eat there? Saved yourself a lot of pain. It's worse food than I got in the Army, and the stuff I got in the Army really wasn't always edible.
Oh, okay.
We got chicken so often at in basic training that I still don't like chicken. We have it, I know, but my family has gotten pretty damn good at figuring out ways to disguise it.
Did you have enough supplies for your job?
We were in the Azores. Brand new lieutenant comes and takes over supply depot. Our magnetron tube, which is the major tube for sending out radar impulses, died. It wasn't anybody's fault, it just died. They had to be handmade. They cost like $250 a pop. Back then, I mean, if we had to make them the same way now, they'd be well over $3,000 a piece. So I went down to the base supply, ordered a magnetron tube. Lieutenant's there, and he says, where's the paperwork? And I said, I don't have any paperwork. I've never needed it. So he opens the drawer and he comes out. He's got a sheaf of papers. I don't know how many because I really didn't look. And plunks it down and says, fill that out in triplicate. Maybe in about 3 days I can get you the tube.
So he had no idea of the importance.
He had no idea of what's going on.
Yeah.
He was just scared to death he was going to get docked if he did something wrong. So he wasn't going to do anything unless he had everything signed, sealed, and delivered. So I went up, called base headquarters, and said GCA is inoperative and will be for an unknown length of time. Why? I said, what do you got? I mean, the first guy I got really didn't give a damn. He shoved it onto another guy who cared a little bit more. And they said, how come? I said, because it's going to take me 3 days to fill out all these papers, and then it's going to take 3 days for this idiot down at the base supply to handle it. I said, we're gone for at least, I'd say probably a week anyhow. About an hour later, I get a call from base supply. You can come get your tube. Seems as how when they told the colonel, he was not a happy camper. He went down there and he reamed out the lieutenant something awful. And he told him, he said, I don't give a goddamn what those boys want. He said, when they come down here and ask for it, you give it to them. You fill out the forms. And don't give me any more stuff, nonsense about it. But sir didn't want to. He didn't listen. And that was it. We never had another problem with it. Getting supplies. I could go down there. I probably could ask for a pencil. They'd give me a whole pack of them. Oh. But that's the only time we had any problem getting the supplies for the equipment. For the food, overseas food was mostly dried. an occasional frozen something would show up. Awful lot of canned stuff. That's about it. I was growing up, I was strictly carnivorous by choice. My first meal in North America was up in Newfoundland. And I happened to be checking in to get myself a bunk, looked over, and I saw this girl pouring a glass of milk. I said, our milk was dried. And she had a salad bowl. I hit my friend Don, and I said, Don, you can do what you want to here. I said, to hell with sleeping, I'm going to go with that, get that fresh food. And Don looked over and he joined me. This little corporal is sitting there saying, but you guys aren't going to have a place to sleep, you guys. I said, food's more important than sleep. Went over. And of course, the corporal signed us up for bunks anyhow. He told us where to go. And I looked over and I said, what's the biggest salad bowl you've got? And she came out with one that was about this big around. And I said, you have any tomatoes? And believe me, in Newfoundland, they're tomatoes, they're not tomatoes. And she said, oh, yeah, I think we still have a couple. And I said, could you chop up some with maybe some onions and lettuce and put them in that bowl, fill it up? Sure, she says, and she starts working on it. And I said, oh, and I'd like a bottle of milk. And of course, it's all in quart bottles, so it's not very big. You know, I sat there and gorged myself. Don got there right after me, and he says, make it two. And the two of us sat there shoveling this fresh lettuce, fresh food, milk with actual cream in it. Not a, you know, it's cream in that milk, you know. Oh, heaven. And then I finally, when I got all finished with it, I looked at her and I said, what else do you have? And I had an appetite. Up until the time I retired, I had an appetite. And it used to boggle my wife because she couldn't understand why our food cost more than other people. It was the quantity of her husband that did it. I've always had a good, fast metabolism. I'm taking some sort of medicine right now that's killed my appetite. But anyhow, that was the food situation. When I was stationed in the Azores, the British RAF boys right here, and I used to, as I say, went over tea time. Well, one of the reasons they loved to have me come was because about every week I'd bring a 5-pound sack of sugar with me. And they like their tea sweet. Or if somebody had something they really wanted, like butter, they had tins of butter. And I'd bring it over because this was still rationed in Great Britain. They were rationed up until 1978, I think. So I know they were still rationed in 79, so that must have been 78. And these guys would, this particular RAF unit was 1/2 Scottish. So that fit right in. You know, your name is what? What are you doing living in the States? You know. And the other half was mostly Northern England, which is Yorkshire. And the accent in Yorkshire and the accents in Scotland don't match. And sometimes you'd almost feel like you ought to translate between the two of them so that they could understand what they were saying. Well, you translate it to American, and they all understood American very well. But they loved to have me come, so I saw a lot of movies there. I saw a movie there that I've never seen repeated anywhere about the attack at El Alamein when the British turned back the Germans. And it was realistic. The Scotties went into battle with the pipers leading the crowd in full regalia, complete with the knife in the sock. It's a skein-dhu, it's what they call it. And the skein-dhu is really for eating purposes, so it's kept sharp. And there was this one spot where this piper is piping and there's a machine gun nest just decimating the troops. They didn't bother with the pipers as much because they didn't have arms. This piper folds up his pipes, puts them down, reaches into his sock, pulls out the skein-dhu, and dives into this machine gun nest, which is really just more or less a foxhole with some humps built up in front of it. And he said, first body comes out, the second body goes another way, the third one comes out, and he comes out, cleans his knife off in the sand, puts it back in the sheath in the skein in his sock, goes back, picks up his pipes, and continues. In another place, one of the pipers goes down, the guy behind him drops his rifle and grabs the pipes. I mean, it was really something to see that. And when you realize that in the beginning, the photographers have got their backs to the Germans and they're coming at you, and then they're going by, and then they're chasing them. You know, the photographers are. You talk about guts. Woo! And I've never seen that movie again. I've never even seen pieces of it. And I would think that, well,
Maybe it's archived somewhere. Did you ever feel pressure or stress?
yeah, sure.
How'd you handle it?
Well, usually in some ridiculous manner.
Oh, okay.
You got to realize we weren't in a do or die situation. When those planes were coming in, yes, then the stress could pile up because in some cases you have a 4-engine plane with 2 engines dead coming in. There's heavy crosswinds. It's not going to be easy on the pilot, and it sure as blazes isn't going to be easy on the people talking him down. We had situations where we had planes that they hadn't been inspected properly, so that they were having problems with the engine, or they were having problems with the gas or something. And they did know one thing. If they were going to leave the Azores, they were going to be in tip-top shape. Our mechanics were very, very, very good.
Were there ever any casualties?
No.
Okay, that's good.
Not from what we were doing.
Okay. Was there anything you carried with you that was for good luck?
I had a ring on my finger that had my family's crest. That's all.
You felt like that was that?
Yeah, it fell off about a month ago. I've lost too much weight in my fingers. So I went and got a different one. This one's a Masonic ring.
Oh, okay.
Although you wouldn't know it to just look at it. You have to really inspect it to find out why.
Secretive. How do people entertain themselves?
A lot of gambling.
Yeah? On the base?
Oh, sure.
Okay.
There's no way you're going to stop it. All you need is a pair of dice and a blanket. And It's like when I was teaching school, and I was more or less a vice principal. I get a call from the head man. Uh, we have a problem. Yeah, what's that? He says, gambling at the high school. I said, I said, I know about it. Well, they say you do. So what? I said, Cliff, I, you can't stop these kids from betting $1 on whether the Pirates are going to win or lose, or whether the football teams, the local colleges, they're gonna spend. Some of these kids could probably go $5 and not worry about it. I said, there's no way I can stop that. He said, oh no, I'm talking about organized gambling. I said, come on, I know about that. He said, well, they say you do. They say you've got a regular setup, roulette wheels, chuckalucks. And I started to laugh. He said, this is serious. And I said, yeah. I said, I teach a course in probability and statistics. We start out with dice. We start out with dice that are crooked and some that aren't. We start out with cards that you can read and some that you can't. We start out with chuck-a-luck. I said, it's this big. I've got a one-armed bandit. It's got 2 pins, 2 rolls, and it's this big. It's plastic.
Yeah.
And I have a roulette wheel. It's this big around. It's got a BB for a pin, for a ball. And I said, Cliff, you figure out the probabilities of these things. And then you can figure out other probabilities. He said, that's what it is? I said, yeah. Well, I said, why don't you, I don't know who's telling you that I've got gambling going on in the school, but let them know what it's for.
Yeah. It'd be nice to stay.
No, we had a busybody lived across the street. And if somebody...
Were there any entertainers or USO shows?
Yeah, we had a USO show came through. It was they did a play,
Oh, cool.
Kiss and Tell, and it's zany enough, so it was more or less like being back in Pelham Manor. Really?
Sure.
Well, if you've ever, I don't know if you've ever seen the movie.
No.
Well, it was. I think I saw it about 12 times because it was like I was getting in for like 15 or 20 cents. Uniform, the whole bit, and it's Shirley Temple, and oh heck, I can't remember the kid's name. The boy, I think he's the one that did Abba Dabba Honeymoon with Debbie Reynolds. But anyhow, Shirley Temple plays the part of the girl, and she's typical teenager, and what she's trying to do is disguise the fact that a friend of hers is pregnant, and everybody thinks it's her.
Oh.
So it makes for some interesting things,
So
and it's hysterical. It's one of the funniest movies I think I've ever seen, and it just reminded me so much of the zany occasions in Pelham. It really did. And so I would go back and see it constantly. And then it shows up in the Azores as a stage play. And they did a beautiful job of it. USO stage play, yeah.
Was there any performing
No,
the members of the
I never saw Bob Hope.
Oh, okay. All right.
And I never saw Eleanor. Did I?
Did they ever have any performances when you and the other members on the base would perform?
No.
No. Okay. Did you ever go on leave?
Yeah, I think I got.
Sister, but where did you go?
I think the only time I really got a leave was when I was stationed at Westover before going overseas,
Okay.
and I think I got 10 days, and I spent it right here.
Okay, you came home.
Oh gosh, yes. What else was I gonna do?
That's what, yeah, many veterans have said that. You've told me many humorous and unusual events, so I don't have to ask about that again. Were there any pranks you or others would pull? Or can you tell me?
Well, the usual number of beds got short sheeted. Uh, that was sort of a given type thing. Um, for other pranks, no, I can't think of any.
You were the one that usually fixed things for people.
I tried to. Well, it was part of my job. Assistant DI was supposed to be able to fix things.
Okay. What did you think of the officers and your fellow servicemen?
Officers generally are pretty nice people. Um, that one idiot that we had that decided he wanted to get electrocuted was he was a rarity. There were always some enlisted people that got another stripe, and so that sort of took them a little bit of time to get used to it. And they'd get, as the kids used to say, power drunk. And but not that often. And very few people messed with me. And I think really, one, I was assistant DI, and two, I was always volunteering.
Right.
So don't mess with him. He takes place of one of our guys, you know.
And he does it well.
And he likes to volunteer, so let him go. Let him go. Don't argue with him.
Tell me about that one guy that got you in trouble and affected your promotion.
Oh, that lieutenant.
That lieutenant.
Yeah, well, I told you about him.
You told me before we were recording, so I want to make sure.
Oh, okay. I was in what we called our radar shack, and which was a building about, I'd say it's about 40 feet long, and it's about 25, 30 feet wide. And it could be a barracks, it could be one of those tin,
Rectangular.
yeah, it's a typical rectangular building made out of sheet metal. And so that you go bing on the noise. And echoing because the noise off that metal just resounded. And I was drawing in three-phase 224 degrees or 240 volts, not degrees, volts. And it's kind of powerful. And the lieutenant comes in, sees it, says, "Oh, are these, you're lining up, put it in series or parallel?" I said, "Parallel, Lieutenant." And I didn't say it out loud, but I kept to myself saying, I don't think they've used DC as current basically since about 1904 or 5, you know. And he says, "Well, that means if it's in parallel, you can grab those wires and you won't get a shock." And I said, "Yes, you would, Lieutenant." He says, "Oh, no, you don't get a shock from parallel." Which is true. If it's only one line, you can, as long as you're not grounded, you'll get a shock from the ground too. And he says, "Oh, no. You see what I mean, grab them." And I really wasn't looking forward to grabbing 240 volts. And I didn't know what to do because I didn't want to do it. And so I did the only thing an enlisted man can do when an officer gives an improper order. I said, "Is that a direct order, sir?" And while I thought he was about as dumb as a stick of wood, he at least knew that if he got something wrong and it hurt, he was going to be in trouble.
Okay.
So he says, "Oh, well," and grabs the wires. And they said he must have come 2 feet off the floor. Yeah. And I collapsed. And the other 3 guys in the room did too, because we'd all had enough of this fellow. It turned out so at the base. So anyhow, he took our stripes away, which we had just gotten that morning.
That was
So-
your sergeant's
So yeah, so I was a sergeant for maybe what? Actual time, maybe 2 hours. And he got shipped off to Bluey West 2, which is a floating ice island in the Arctic Ocean. And it's, as far as I know, is still operable.
So and maybe he's still there. Did your CO didn't reissue your stripes for you?
He couldn't until the next month.
Oh, okay.
And by the next month, I had received a note from my father. "Hey, I've been told that anybody who's been accepted at an accredited college is eligible for discharge now." So I went I went up the chain of command. Nobody had heard of it. So I wrote back to Dad and I said, "Nope, nobody's heard of it here." And by return mail, I got a letter, the commanding officer of the base got a letter, and my dad got a letter, personally signed by the Adjutant General of the United States Army, and in it enclosed was the directive. I was not greeted with joy up at the commanding officer's area, because it meant half his unit was going to disappear. Well, it meant almost all of us were going to get out, aside from the bootlegger maybe. But we were all either in a college or accepted. And
So you were eligible.
and boy, believe me, I took it.
Good.
And the guys who didn't, half of us did. We had 6 of us took it, and 5 of us stayed working for Pan American and getting $600 a month, and all of our living expenses, food, and uniforms. $600 a month in 1946 was a heck of a lot of money, especially as the fact there was a depression going on in the United States. I almost took that and figured if I did that for about 2 years, I'd be set for life. But I didn't.
When to go home.
I
Did you
wonder.
keep a journal when you were over there?
No.
When you were in service?
No.
Okay. So where were you when your service ended? Was that?
I was discharged.
You told me?
I was discharged at Andrews Air Force Base in Washington, D.C.
Okay. And then, okay.
Where
And that was, you were sent from the Azores after?
I was sent from the Azores to go to, we thought we were going into Springfield.
Okay.
We got to Newfoundland, and it took us 11 tries before we landed, because they were having a blizzard, and we didn't have any place else to go. I mean, it was either land or crash. And of course, we're sitting there, us 6 corporals.
I know radar, the radar man.
Knowing exactly what's going on downstairs, down below, and we had assorted majors and colonels and 1 lieutenant. The lieutenant was reading the Saturday Evening Post, and they never turned a page in all those 11 tries. And the colonels and the majors were all swapping addresses. "If I make it and you don't, would you call my wife?" Type thing. And we're just sitting there talking back. "How's the magnetron tube's probably burned out, and just joking about it. What else were we gonna do? I mean, gee. And we finally touched down and spent 9 days in Newfoundland. That's all right. By then it was December, and a blizzard meant, hey, it's gonna be a white Christmas.
That's
At least in Newfoundland. Oh, God.
What was your homecoming like when you finally got here? Was it more?
Well, let's put it this way. I got to Andrews Air Force Base and found out I was told it was going to be 9 days at least before they got to me. Well, they had a lot of people coming in. And I said, oh, good. Can I go home? Well, where do you live? I said, Connecticut. No. A suburb of New York City? No. Annapolis? Well, sure, you can go to Annapolis. My uncle, who was a career Navy and a captain, was head of the engineering department at Annapolis. And his wife and his son were also, and his daughter were also there. And I went to Annapolis. My aunt took one look at me and said, my God, what do you weigh? And I weighed 115 pounds, which was a little light for me. And she immediately set to work. By the time I left Annapolis, I weighed 120 solid pounds. And I weighed more after meals. I'll tell you, I was eating 6 meals a day and
Real food.
oh, real food. And I was spending my free time in the engineering department where there were radar people.
Oh, good.
I got to go to the Christmas hop, which is the dance at Annapolis. Everything I had on except for my underwear was borrowed, and my shoes, which I had just bought at the Navy PX. I had a pair, and they lasted me for 30 years. I got married in them, for crying out loud. And it was dandy. And then I went back to the base and met my friend Ralph. And Ralph got me out, and I was on the 1 o'clock train for Pelham. Well, actually, for New York City. And when I got to New York City, I had enough money to buy a ticket to Pelham. And I wouldn't have minded if I hadn't, because my dad was working in New York and I knew where I could go to get the money to get out of New York. And I got home and I more or less walked in to a surprised family. That was fun. Yeah.
Did you go to work or did you go right to school?
I went right to school, right to college. Pardon?
GI Bill?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
You bet your life.
Okay.
If it hadn't been for the GI Bill, I would have worked my way through. And I probably wouldn't have gone to Williams. Well, Williams at that time was not expensive. It wasn't. And they were accepting GI students.
Did your close friendships in the service, did you continue with any of those
No.
relationships?
No.
No, but you did have that group of buddies.
I had that group of buddies, and for a number of years I corresponded with 2 of them. And then they moved, and I didn't have an address. And I never got one.
Well, maybe this will put you in touch with them,
Oh,
if you
God,
want to.
those poor guys.
So your career after your service was
College.
college, and then
I got out of the service, basically, I think my formal discharge is February, and I was at Williams.
okay, and then what was your career when you graduated?
I didn't graduate from Williams. I graduated from, back then it was called Southwestern at Memphis, and now it's called Rhodes College. It's in Memphis.
Okay.
It's a Presbyterian college, and it was the first co-ed institution I'd seen since I was about 13.
And what degree did you graduate from there?
BA
BA.
in English.
In English? Really?
Well, as I told you, I found out what astronomers do all the time and decided that I wanted something different. So, and the poor registrar, Dr. Johnson, terrific guy. I thought he was going to swallow his pipe when I told him I wanted to do English. He looked at me and said, you've got to go to summer school. I said, Doctor, I've been going to summer school since before I got to college.
How did your military experience influence your thinking about war or the military in general?
Well, it persuaded me that we needed a strong military. Since I thought we were going to go to war with Russia, looks like that's going to come later on. And war, it's such a waste. It really is. It's a terrific waste. It's a waste of people. It's a waste of materials. It's a great deal of effort that could be used somewhere else. But I'm sorry, when you get smacked, you've got to retaliate just to prove that it isn't a good idea. I wouldn't want another war, but I'd be, I'll fight. I don't know what I could do at 88, but
Step up. So you never joined any veterans organizations?
only organization I joined was Masons.
Okay. And so you never went to any reunions for your company or anything?
No, never went to any military reunions. I've been to 2 high school reunions and 1 college reunion.
Okay. So when you were talking about how you feel about the military now, that's how your service and experiences affected your life?
Yeah, the military can be a good effect on somebody. And if they enter it with a positive attitude, I think they can get something out of it. If they enter it grudgingly or, I don't know, trying to prove that they're a better guy than the next guy, I don't think it's as good. But generally speaking, if you enter the military and want to treat it as part of your education, I think it's a good thing. Yeah, and I, as far as I'm concerned, there ought to be universal military training across the board, men and women, and it ought to be obligatory. And if you, well, I'm not going to join them. It's against my religion to fight. You don't have to fight. You can support.
Serving your country, and it's like community service. You just help two people doing it.
Yeah. Well, why should they? The government does it all.
So they don't get paid. Is there anything else you want to add that hasn't been covered?
Too much.
Well, thank you for your service, and this has been a pleasure talking to you.
Well, it's been a pleasure kind of trying to put it all together after 70 years.
It's amazing how it comes back too,
Oh yes.
Great.
Oh yes.
It's